and I am honored to introduce the moderator of our first event, who is also my boss, Alan Bjerga. Alan serves as Senior Vice President of Communications for the National Milk Producers Federation. In this role, he leads the organization's communications efforts, focusing on media relations, marketing, and digital storytelling. He previously worked at Bloomberg News as its lead writer on national farm policy issues, covering topics including the Farm Bill, agricultural trade, and rural economics. His book on global hunger and food security, Endless Appetites, was published in 2011. Bjerga is a past president of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., as well as a North American agricultural journalist. Alan, we are happy to have you here, and we look forward to the discussion.
And thank you for the kind introduction, Teresa, and congratulations on another successful YC conference, one that undoubtedly has been put out in some challenging circumstances. Challenging circumstances is part of what we're going to be talking about today on our panel, Dairy Co-ops in the Future, Adapting in a Changing World. We've all seen some dramatic changes in the past few months, and some of these changes are going to linger with us in ways anticipated and unanticipated for a very long time. Today, to discuss some of these challenges is really a top-tier panel of folks with deep cooperative experience and a diverse range of perspectives on adapting to a changing world in the context of a dairy cooperative. We have with us Sheryl Meshke. She is the co-president and chief executive officer of Associated Milk Producers Incorporated, AMPI, the largest cheese cooperative that's based in the U.S. During her career, she's held numerous positions at AMPI, responsible for the co-op strategic planning, public affairs, human resources, and communications. She's also on the board of directors for the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, the National Milk Producers Federation, the U.S. Dairy Export Council, and the Minnesota Agri-Growth Council. The fifth generation hog and sheep farmer. I did not know this about you, Sheryl. I also grew up raising sheep near Lake Crystal, Minnesota. I was just a little bit north of you. Also joining us is Dennis Rodenbaugh from Dairy Farmers of America. He is the Executive Vice President and President for the Council on Global Ingredients Operations. He joined DFA in 2007 as its Director of Business Development, and after serving in several roles, including that of Chief Operating Officer for DFA's Mideast area and responsibility for the Western and Mountain areas of DFA, he gained his current position in 2019, where he has responsibility for overseeing U.S. milk marketing, farm services, ingredient solutions, and other related business units. He has extensive background in finance and banking, as well as business development and startups, including dairy ownership and management. So a lot of innovation going on at DFA, and Dennis is in the thick of all of it. James Cricket Jacquier, better known as, is a member of NMPF's executive committee, and he's chairman of the board for Agri-Mark. His farm, LaurelBrook Farm, outside East Canaan, Connecticut, is a fourth generation dairy that deals with all of the traditional challenges of dairy farming, such as effective risk management, which I'm sure we'll talk about today, as well as more contemporary ones, such as gentrification, as the COVID-19 crisis drives up land values in his region. And finally, we have with us Ken Bailey. He's the head of policy analysis and milk pricing at Northeast. I've been thinking about the Northeast with Cricket at Northwest Dairy Association, Darigold, focusing on pricing and policy issues for members as well as trade. He's recently been active in helping Darigold and the U.S. dairy industry better understand global trade agreements, including USMCA, US-Japan, and US-EU policy. Before Darigold, he was a professor of dairy markets and policy at Penn State University, was a consultant broker at International IFC Stone. He's also worked at FAPRI, at the USDA's ERS. His PhD in agricultural economics, again, reaching the gold standard, is from the University of Minnesota. No biases being revealed by your moderator. So thank you so much for joining us. And also continuing, you might consider this another form of bias, but it's actually, I think, a key to entering this conversation. I'm going to call on Sheryl first. And it's not just because she has a sheep farm. From your position at AMPI, Sheryl, could you describe a little bit about how your cooperative has reacted to the coronavirus crisis? What tough decisions have you had to make? How do those positions position you for the days ahead?
Great question to kick it off. Let's reflect a bit. Back in March, the pandemic shut down virtually the global economy. Then in April, we saw $1 cheese. Then in July, we saw $3 cheese. Then let's go back to March, April, we saw a 70% climb in retail sales. And in one of our plants that serves the food service market, literally orders ground to a halt. And so the impact was that initially we kept the milk flowing from the farms. Fortunately, we didn't need to dump. Our natural cheese plants were literally sold out. But back to those plants that serve the food service industry, very difficult. We even had to lay off for a couple of weeks. I would equate the challenge still in those food service plants to trying to convert a heifer facility into a milking parlor. It probably can be done, but it takes a lot of capital and a lot of time. And that's the decision-making process we're in right now in our food service lines. So how long-term will this be? And should we be converting some of those packaging lines to serve the robust retail businesses?
When you look at timelines, Sheryl, in terms of some of those decisions, how far ahead do you have to be looking, and how far ahead can you look?
You know, it's a rule of thumb that so many pieces of equipment in our manufacturing plants, AMPI, dairy farmer owners, own 8 plants. They manufacture 85% of their milk in their own assets. Much of that equipment takes at least a year for lead time. And of course, there's some that's even more. So these are long-term decisions, and they really need to be well placed because they're utilizing scarce capital.
Speaking of farmer owners, cricket, you and I have spoken a lot about how coronavirus has taught lessons about the importance of risk management for a dairy farmer. The DMC program is reaching its sign-up window right now. Farmers are starting to plan for next year and think about what their strategies are going to be. How are you managing your farm differently going into 2021 than you did when you're going into 2020?
Yeah, thanks, Alan, for that question. And I thought as a farmer we were pretty good at predicting what our milk prices were going to be, and really, I think a lot of the risk management didn't come into our farm's really mindset here until about the last 2 years. I think the lessons learned from 2009, seeing the dramatic change what happened in 2014, and how this pandemic has rolled out, what it's done to us, has all brought this up to a much higher level. So for our farm, I see 3 areas of where we're going to be making major changes this coming year. In the risk management category, DMC was not one of those that I even signed up for. To me, that's one of those we should look at, and you need to sign up. We just can't predict where that market's going, those types of things. So that's one that would just be moved into the deck of cards pretty easily. But on the other hand, given the great changes that National Milk has made with some of these programs, we're going to be layering in more of like DRP, LGM, all trying to really stabilize our prices going forward. And secondly, I would say towards budgeting and cash flows, more strict attention to quarterly reviews on your budgets, putting in a line item in there for risk management now. That's new for us. Just dedicate some to start working with those programs and see how they affect you. And thirdly, an area I would say my biggest weakness, and farmers I think have a lot of hesitation with this, is in the HR category. So this pandemic has really heightened the awareness around worker safety, masks, emergency plans around if we have a positive employee, what are we going to do? All of those types of things. And I think it circles right back to where the workforce development category in the farm program. So there'll be much more resources dedicated in that area.
I want to push back on you a little bit on the DMC, and please don't let anyone else at National Milk hear me say this, because, DMC is something that we worked really, really hard to get to farmers, and we believe strongly in it as a risk management tool. But I do want to bring up a point just to sort of delve a little bit further for the farmers in our audience to understand how DMC works and the effectiveness of it. DMC offers a very strong coverage up to 950 margins if you buy up to 950 coverage. But it only covers your first 5 million pounds of milk, and that's 200, maybe a shade over 200 cows. And a lot of operations, understanding a lot of YCs have smaller operations, but dairy farms are just getting larger and larger. Your farm is a little more than 200 cows, but how does DMC work into your risk management plan, even if someone, their herd size may be, say, 500 cows or more?
Yeah, so the DMC fitting into this program for us, the cost versus benefit ratio just makes it as one of those you must do. When you look at all of these other programs, you can layer those in there. But for that first 5 million pounds, it really seems like it's a real benefit with the cost side of it that they have right now.
And that might be something that farmers can understand as well, because that's a change from the old MPP program.
Yeah.
I mean, MPP, there were more choices that you had to make. You didn't have the same ability to layer in that you can now. That would seem like the sort of thing that, you could take a fresh look at when you're making your risk management plan.
Right. And I think once you saw what happened this past year, when that 5 million pounds would actually a couple dollars a hundredweight, it's significant impact to the farm, and no matter what size level your herd may be.
And pretty quickly acting too, because it's already put into law. It's not like waiting for a CFAP payment to be administered. As welcome as it is, that's based on Congress and the White House, and you don't know what the Congress and the White House is going to look like from year to year. So all
Right.
Very valid points, all very worthwhile points, and we'll want to come back to some later in the conversation. I want to turn to Dennis, because now you're looking at this from a different perspective, working with DFA. In this crisis, how did being a cooperative help DFA in its response to this?
Well, I think if you look at a cooperative structure, our cooperative structure is fairly typical, I think, in terms of having a grassroots structure where you have representation locally. We have divisions locally that are looking at the milk marketing, working with customers. I'd like to say, and we do have a division that looks at potential risks and how do we mitigate those risks, and we develop those strategies. I'd like to say that in 2019, we had global pandemic on that list, and that we reached behind us and grabbed our binder that said, this is how you're going to react. We didn't have that. So as we were working on some other major focuses entering into 2020, we were watching this global pandemic kind of out of the corner of our eye, seeing the impact on our exports initially, watching the news a bit, but the information was a little spotty. We began as a co-op to develop internally, corporate-wise, kind of a structure across our divisions to say, what ifs? What if we have truckers that become ill and can't haul milk? How do we mitigate the risks of transmitting this illness, this very unknown illness at the time, to our members? We want to keep them healthy. We want to keep the truck drivers healthy. We want to keep the employees at the plants healthy. And we also want to keep the operation, the industry moving. So at all levels, I think we developed and pushed on the relationships that we have in partnership with other cooperatives, and the relationship with USDA, relationships and contacts at OSHA, EPA, other regulatory areas that could have had real impacts on the ability for the industry to operate. I think being a cooperative, a U.S. dairy cooperative, working in partnership with the other cooperatives within National Milk, I recall internal discussions when we were looking back at the end of March and April at the milk pricing. Our concern really wasn't about our own P&L. It was struggling a bit, but we saw devastation on the edges for producers across the U.S. I remember Randy Mooney, the chairman of National Milk and also DFA, saying, if we don't enact some kind of a change here, there is going to be devastation among the producer community. And it was all hands on deck from all levels of the organization to all contacts that we have and partnerships that we have to try to gain support. Those things that we now look back on and say, okay, we developed as an industry support for CFAP 1, CFAP 2, going back to those things that were developed, margin protection, DRP, leaning on our own risk management tools that we offered members. So I think as a cooperative, it was critical that we have the relationships at a local level, at a national level, and everything in between.
And Kenneth, turning that back to 2021, given all the context that Dennis has just given, what could 2021 look like for a dairy farmer? And what advice would you have, following on some of the things Cricket had to say, trying to be an effective manager for next year?
Yes, well, 2020 was a unprecedented year. I think all of us in the dairy industry had never experienced the kind of volatility, the kind of market conditions that we experienced. It was about 2 weeks after the lockdown that we began to see the impact on the market prices. Just devastating reduction in price, cheese going to $1. And there were some plants in the US that suddenly their food service demand just evaporated. It just wasn't there. And so there was and this was during the spring flush. So it was a tremendously stressful time. We were doing everything we could at Darigold to keep our employees healthy, to keep the plants running, keep things smooth. Suddenly, when the government came in with very good programs, the Farm to Families Food Box program, and all of a sudden people were rushing to the grocery store to stock up, we had this unprecedented demand facing us and others in the US. So we saw cheese prices just rocket the other way. Global demand also was pretty good for powder. It was slow, steady buildup. And so lots of volatility in the marketplace, but we did everything we could to keep those plants open, keep everyone safe, keep everything going. So the second half of the year, we began to see a slow, steady improvement in market conditions. Of course, the milk supply, we're asking farmers to make more milk, and we are starting to see a very strong growth in the milk supply. So going into 2021, we're going to have more milk, and at the same time, funding for these food donation programs are sort of up in the air right now. The stimulus spending, which is so critical for the overall health of the U.S. economy, is not there right now. And we hope after the elections that can be negotiated and discussed, and we can get continued help for the dairy industry, including continuation of the Farm to Family Food Box program. So going into 2021, the big issue is the recession. We are in a recession right now. We saw the GDP that just came out showed a dramatic bounce back, and we do expect to see a continued recovery through 2021. So that's the good news. The good news, quarter to quarter, we'll see strong economic growth. But we still will see a lot of people unemployed. Their purchasing power will be greatly reduced. So we'll need to have these food donation programs and other stimulus spending to help people go in the grocery store and getting these food donations. So good managers, what can they do, or what would effective managers do heading into next year? This is a year where it really highlights the importance, and we've been discussing it, of a good, solid risk management plan. Not just for 1 month, not for 1 quarter. You need an ongoing effective risk management program that will help you through. We've had a black swan event we haven't never experienced for most of us in the dairy industry this year. And so having that effective risk management program, I think, will be critical for our farmers next year, because we'll continue to see volatility throughout the year.
I want to reiterate the note that just came up for everyone. If you have any questions for this panel, please use the Q&A box to ask those. We've kind of done a round among all of the panelists, and we're going to do another round of questions as well, but your questions are also going to be very important. So don't hesitate to use the Q&A box and ask some questions. I do want to ask one question for everyone on the panel to consider. And this is, again, following from the conversation we've had about the challenges of the past year. What is the challenge that is being faced by your cooperative in the next year, and how are you planning to face it? Let's start with you, Ken. With understanding that maybe you don't always want to be the spokespeople for your cooperative. Some of you are better positioned than this and others. But taking a full range of the look at the gamuts of things that your members are talking about, things that are dealing with your marketing. What's something that you're looking at in the next year saying, here's a problem and here's our plan to solve?
Well, I mean, it's three things. I mean, we have our long-term strategic plans that we'd like to implement, and we don't want to have that interrupted. So we want to continue with that. We also have to really be we have a very strict protocols at our plants and our headquarters for keeping people safe. We want to keep all of our plants open. We don't want to shut down any plants. And so we're fighting every day to keep our people healthy. And I think Stan's done a fantastic job, and our people have done a great job of mitigating that at our plants, because it's critical. The nation's depending on our food supply. We've got to keep them open. And then the third thing is basically from a P&L point of view, how do you navigate this volatility for both our members and for the Darigold itself from a manufacturing standpoint? How do you manage through? It'll be a critical year because we do expect prices to soften as we enter this new year. We do expect to continue to have a major recession. And so how do we navigate through that all the while implementing the rest of our business plans?
From the Northwest to the Northeast, Cricket, what would you have to say?
So a couple of things come to mind here is we can't forget that this pandemic is not over. It's far from over. And as was just brought up about the continued, you don't let back the reins here during this type of situation. The plants must stay open. It is so important for the farmers at home to realize the importance of that one piece right there. We've all had examples of disruption in the marketplace, from even in the meat sector and those types of things. But one plant in our situation at Agri-Mark will have a major impact back to our farmers. So really making sure we're focusing on making sure our eye is on the ball with that. There's huge opportunities that lay before us with retail. As you know, food service has ramped down. There's the retail side of this is just blossoming, and taking advantage of those opportunities and being able to really be able to react and deliver those products to market is really right now the real focus that's happening. If I go back to the membership, I think we all during this pandemic, we sit here and we have to learn different ways to communicate with our farmers, right? We're all going virtually, and this has really allowed our co-op to manage the whole communications piece in a very different way. And we have very diverse memberships. We all do. Our 750 members can be from 10 cows to 3,000 cows, very diverse audience to be getting this information to. So there's a lot of that going on within the cooperative right now to make sure our communications are getting to our members.
Sheryl, when Cricket was talking about keeping the plants open, I saw you nodding pretty vigorously. Would you be able to elaborate in terms of challenges for the next year?
Absolutely. I'm going to really take from some comments Ken and Cricket made that number one, keeping members safe, employees safe, and to keep those customer orders filled. And that's all dependent upon that chain. Members, employees. We're sold out in our natural cheese. We are running brim full to keep those orders stocked. And these are different orders. These are retail, retail is robust. And at the same time, you've got, to repeat what I referenced earlier, you have some food service lines that are not back to where they were, and we don't expect them to be so. So in the coming months, we need to make those decisions, how to either stick with those lines in hopes for recovery or make a change.
Dennis.
Yeah, I think it would go along the lines. I think Cricket mentioned it. So did Ken. I think it is the second or third or fourth wave, whatever we're going to call it. I don't know which one we're in now. And it is what is going to be the reaction to this pandemic. really the reaction we've seen as a U.S., really as a globe, we've never seen this before. Even if you went back to World War II, you didn't see the U.S. economy shut down in the way that the U.S. economy shut down in this pandemic. It was unprecedented and unplannable. As we look into 2021, I think our primary concern, and we've talked about this a great deal internally, what is going to be the milk value back to our members? What's going to be their sustainability? What risk management tools will they be able to adopt to get through what might be tremendous volatility? From the cooperative standpoint, we did go through, as I said, in late March, April, May, our P&L was off like everybody else's. We had some level of concern, but we're diversified. We were going through, as you know, kind of a major transaction acquisition at that time. And so we went from 8,500 employees to 20,000 employees, and grew our sales, our manufacturing plants from 40 to 87 manufacturing plants. So as we look at 2021, it's the ongoing integration of additional business units, employees, making sure that we're driving efficiencies and that we're taking care of our members. But as you think about the impact of this shutdown, it goes beyond the P&L. And Cricket touched on it. How do you connect with your members and with in our case, 20,000 employees? What are they feeling? We hear on the news challenges that people are facing personally. None of us are immune to that. And I think one of maybe our newest and most important initiatives is making sure that we're reaching out, connecting, and that we'll get through this thing together, because people being alone in their own minds through a crisis like this, I think that can be one of the most challenging things. You don't freeze in a crisis. We need to keep driving forward, but we got to do that together or we'll leave some people behind. And I think that's our number one concern.
I want to follow up a little bit on the challenges that you had this year managing the COVID crisis, as well as your own acquisition and evolution as a company. I'll get back to that in a moment, but do want to note one thing. It was mentioned in terms of challenges in communications. Working within my own role, I can say it has been an incredible opportunity, an incredible evolution in the communications realm in terms of getting important information to folks. On the one hand, you lose the in-person, face-to-face contact and some of the media exchanges you can have there. On the other hand, I see we have 72 participants on this, and YC events have always been very well attended at our annual meeting, but I'm quite certain there are people on this call who would not be experiencing this were it not in a virtual environment. And at least there's some very interesting thoughts going in the future as far as how things are conducted. Perhaps there can be expanded virtual offerings for some folks, and maybe some people will whet their appetite to actually make a trip. Next year's conference will be in Las Vegas, and hopefully we'll get to see each other in person again someday, somehow. But in the meantime, you have us on our Zoom boxes, our Brady Bunch boxes, and people can send in questions. I want to take this moment actually to ask a question. This is the first one that came in, and this is something that I would not have thought of, but it is certainly true. And it leads to a very interesting question. Fun fact, each cooperative featured on this panel had award-winning cheeses at this year's NMPF cheese contest. Congratulations to all of them. Here, quick, let me get this icon. I'm not seeing it. Well, I'll give you my hand clap soon. The question is, how important is the quality of the dairy products you produce when it comes to keeping or expanding markets in these challenging times? What is the premium on quality these days?
Where do you want to start?
Open to the floor.
I'll start and then let others clean me up. I think it's critical. What we saw in 2020, I think, was a rush to quality. Consumers changed their lifestyle. They spent more time at home, began cooking more, and they began looking more for those quality items, those comfort items in some cases, I think, that reminded them nostalgically of their childhood and of safety, security, health. And so dairy benefited from that as the greatest nutritional product that they can provide to their families, and some of the most comforting products. And you think about the day that people now, you'd pick up a breakfast bar and people are running to work and they're eating a snack at lunch, and it's the race. In the last few months, I think our consumers have been reintroduced, not just here in the US, but globally, to reintroduce to their families, for one. And secondly, to a different way of eating, sitting down to cereal again, to a breakfast, to a snack of yogurts, drinking more milk, exploring different cheese items. And I think it's been a race again to quality. And I think we're going to benefit from that. I think, you talked about, Alan, the things we've learned and the things we're getting in terms of a benefit from technology. We may change things going forward. I think there's going to be a lingering benefit here. And so I think as we've looked at the products that we're marketing both here in the US and also globally, is connecting those consumers to the quality, the safety, taking this opportunity to introduce and in some cases reintroduce people back to dairy. And I think we're going to benefit from that as long as we don't waste that great opportunity.
Other thoughts?
If I could I'll take a shot at it too. I think about it from the farmer level to the co-op level to, yes, our award-winning cheddar cheese and products that we make under the Cabot brand. But the farmers, I think we're always trying to really challenge the cooperative, making sure that, the farmer needs to be successful. The cooperative needs to be successful, both financially, works both ways. And when it comes to quality of product, and especially during a pandemic, you don't compromise anything to get and you'll lose your quality very quickly, and you lose your market, right? So I think, as much these two go hand in hand, but investments and infrastructure in our plants is something it needs to be there. It's going to be a continuum along the way to get entry into the export markets. There's a constant focus of, it's kind of a race to the end of who can get there first with some of the highest quality ingredient or products to the market. So, it's, for an example, in the cheddar cheese, the aged cheddar, not all cheese can make an aged cheddar. People might not realize that 100% of what you start out with doesn't really end up there. And whatever you can do to mitigate that and create more getting to that is a constant work that goes on within an organization.
I'll take a stab at the fact that AMPI, we have a saying that we make what we sell. And so sales comes first, then we turn to the farmer and say, bring on the heifers, and then we right size the manufacturing facilities. Those sales during this pandemic, as Tom Gallagher referenced earlier this week, the consumer wants the taste, they want the price, but now it's also about sustainability and accessibility. So we've got some more elements introduced to satisfying our customer. Two observations from my seat, and we market about upwards of 600 million pounds annually of cheese. What we saw was that the consumer continues to want the basics, the cheddars, the mozzarellas, but we saw significant uptick in demand for our premium cheeses. So think habanero pepper jack, Carolina Reaper, smoky cheddar. So there's an appetite for both ends of the cheese spectrum.
I want to, Ken, I know that you're jumping in, and if you want to talk about quality at some point, we'll take it. But I actually want to keep things moving along, and we have a couple questions from the audience. So we're just to factor this in. And I got to say, Sheryl referred nicely to something that will be in question 2. But question 1 has Ken Bailey written all over it. This is a Ken question, if e'er there were one. So we're jumping on this one to you. Would the food box program be better with bids farther out because the last minute bids hurt hedgers with extreme class 3 volatility without raising the farm gate price nearly as much because of the large PPDs? In 20 words or less. I added that last part of my own. Yeah, please. Detail is appreciated.
The farm price did go up. If you look at the end price, the farm gate price, it did go up massively with the huge increase we've seen in cheese prices. $3 price, regardless of the PPD, the overall price at the farm level, when you add it all up, did go up. I'm sure that the administration would like to see continued improvements in how they roll out the food box program to make sure that qualified bidders are in place, that they're qualified to actually manage the supply chain on that, and that they're in the business, and so no doubt that the USDA is revamping how they go about that bid price process. But what really helps farmers is a sustained, stable price that is going on for more than 1 month. It goes on over a quarter or a half a year. That's in the marketplace. That's the best. When you have $3 cheese prices, it's going to happen. It's going to go down the next month. So you want a sustained, steady flow, and so a continuation of the food box program, because it's needed, would also have the indirect effect of helping our farmers a great deal.
I want to ask one more question from the audience, and then we'll get back to our conversation for this panel on the future of cooperatives. But this questioner says, I have mixed feelings about the farm program. I really do not like the co-op and farm telling me how to run my dairy. Is it really needed? And what's next? Sheryl, you have been talking
Can
about.
I jump in there real quick, or?
Please. I'll open the floor.
Go ahead, Sheryl. You'll do a better job answering that than I will. I'm sure of that.
It's just really timely. This is the season when we are meeting with all of our natural cheese customers, and they are booking their purchases for the coming year. To a company, to a person, they are asking about our farm status, FARM, and are we adopting the environmental stewardship pieces of that. Farm is about a decade old, and I worked at AMPI a long time. I recall when it was first adopted, we considered it, there were so many of our customers who wanted to visit our individual farms. And we offered this program as a way to assure them of all the things they were asking for as far as animal care, etc. Now, fast forward about a decade, they continue to ask. It is an extra step on the farm, but I think it's not only critically domestically, but our international customers in many ways are demanding even more than our domestic customers are. And so it's the cost of doing business when you're sitting there talking to leading customers.
I'll jump in and say, as a former dairyman, and probably just by personality, I don't like being told what to do either. So probably the first project I ever worked on when I joined DFA almost 15 years ago was what we call DFA's gold standard. It was, I'll say it preceded farm by a bit. I struggle with that concept of how do you tell dairy farmers, advise this is how things need to be done. I've now since, spent 14 years marketing milk to customers, US-based companies, global companies. This is critical. And it becomes even more critical, and I've gone through a few of these when we would call maybe an animal care crisis. And the customers are asking, what's the situation? How are they responding? What were the facts behind this? And to be able to step forward and show documentation that this farm was doing the things in the right way, making the right efforts, putting the right protocols, procedures in place. And maybe, like we all do, we have an employee maybe that made a mistake. In some cases, maybe this was even some people coming on to a dairy farm to try to create an issue and being able to document that the normal protocols and the expectations are A, and this new employee maybe did B. That has salvaged markets. And we look at it and I always think of our membership as kind of a small m, the individual member, and then the broader responsibility to the entire membership. And we ask each one of our members, please don't do something that would put at risk the milk markets for the broader membership. And I think that's what farm is. And it goes beyond animal care. I think it is going to go into some additional areas where we'll have modules. There's more interest in how employees are being treated within the industry. And I don't think this is going to stop. And so it is, I think to Sheryl's point, it's the cost of doing business. And yet we balance this and we do push back in order to try to maintain what we think is very critical, which is these are individual business owners. They're CEOs of their companies. They're the owners of our cooperative and cooperatives. And we don't take that lightly. And yet we need to maintain milk markets now and into the future.
If I just real quick with a few words on that, I think as a dairy farmer and pretty apprehensive with the program in the first initial stages of it, but a program that we certainly embrace fully at this point in time. And you heard me talk about the HR component of that, probably building on that in the future. But as a farmer, we want our cooperatives to really be designing these products that these consumers want. We want to be ahead of them and be ready for them when they get there. And to me, animal care is top of mind. It's definitely questions that they're asking, how we're handling our animals. It's all part of this puzzle of putting this together. But if we don't have one program that we're all working for, we are certainly going to have many, many different programs to be working with. And I think we as a dairy industry are very united and collective and can work together we know what's right for the industry. And I like the idea of having one program that we all are is working for us across the country and quite frankly, across the world.
I think you're all speaking very cogently toward industry evolution. I mean, the farm program started in 2009 as a set of needs, and a lot of those needs have evolved and in some ways intensified. Dennis, you were talking a few moments ago about some of the evolution taking place at DFA and some of the challenges within the industry. And I wanted to ask you, in your career, you've seen dairy cooperatives evolve significantly as the industry has evolved. How does that industry evolution shape cooperatives? And how do cooperatives shape how the industry evolves?
Yeah, well, yes, you're right. They do shape one another. I would say there's two types of evolution. One's fairly reactive. And we saw that in what we were doing. We did not anticipate, for example, that in 2020, we were looking to buy the largest fluid bottling business in the US. We didn't anticipate that the two largest bottling businesses in the US would be entering into bankruptcy. So that was a reactive evolution where we said we need to step forward and lean into this because the impact, and we didn't know COVID was coming at the time, but as you look at those now combined happening at the same time, we were working from December, let's say, through May to complete an acquisition of approximately 43 fluid bottling plants across the US. During that period of time, COVID hits. We had the food service implosion. We had milk being pushed back, hundreds of loads a day of milk being put on the ground. And we thought about what if we weren't able to keep these manufacturing plants operating, if they had gone dark, and we had contingency plans being put in place. But think about the underlying milk markets today, had those been damaged beyond maybe returning and recovering back into operation. So that's an example, I would say, of looking at something and reacting to it for the benefit of our members and the industry and consumers. And would we risk maybe losing consumers to other products, alternative beverages, if the fluid products weren't available in the stores? And then you've got more of a proactive, forward-thinking evolution that we all need to go through. And that's certainly where we're seeing a lot of capital investment going. When you think about, and certainly we've seen increased consumption of cheese in the US, good, strong yogurt growth in the US. We've seen declining class one. you take it all into account combined with the production trends, and we're going to see more milk being moved overseas. And I think as an organization and as an industry, we have to decide, and we've made this decision, that we're not going to just allow that milk to be dumped at some kind of a distressed or disposed capacity. We want to get closer to the global consumer. And so while we maybe used to work more through brokers, and you would have seen most of our exports being worked through brokers, we're nearing 75 to 80% of our customer sales being direct relationship overseas, developing product solutions, meeting the customer needs, getting closer to the consumers around the globe, so that U.S. milk solids, as they begin to exceed our great domestic market, have a good home globally to what's going to end up being 10 plus billion people around the globe. So the evolution demands investment, and investment demands that we have great strength within our membership, and that our farms are successful. And so it's all interrelated.
You would think after doing these since March, you wouldn't start talking without unmuting yourself, but I guess you get so caught up in your question. I apologize. Well, here's what you missed. Ken, why do cooperatives still make economic sense, and how do you see co-ops evolving to meet farmer needs in the future?
Right. Well, I think they do absolutely make good economic sense now more than ever. And top of mind, if you just look at what's recently happened this past year, you can give many examples why they make good sense. I think three things come to mind immediately. Collectively marketing your milk. We've seen instances before COVID and every year before that where someone outside of a co-op will wake up, a farm will wake up, and they don't have a market the next day. So that's always going to be an important part of it. And we can't just take that for it's important to have a market that's going to be there every day for your milk. Co-ops tend to invest differently than proprietary firms. They take a much, much longer view, and they think more about the community. They think more about their members and the broader dairy market. So I think their investment strategy is a much more long-term that you wouldn't necessarily see in a proprietary market. And it's always important. We always have to stress having one voice is critical, not just in, for example, federal milk marketing orders but in domestic policy and trade policy. Look what happened when we've had these lockdowns and the markets imploded. National Milk went immediately to USDA with one voice, and within a month, we had a farmers to family food box program up and running. The CARES Act that was passed, USDA immediately implemented a lot of that. And there was from a lot of advice coming from dairy cooperatives through one voice to National Milk where that occurred. The other area where one voice is important is in trade policy. If we're going to go from 15% of the U.S. milk being exported to 20%, we need greater market access. And getting market access overseas is a tough job. The USTR, the administration has to chip away and fight very hard to get that market access. We saw that recently with Canada, how hard we had to fight with that. In order to do that, you have to advise the USDA and tell them what you're thinking. One voice is critical, not 100 voices, 20 voices with different agendas, different perspectives. One voice is critical. And so looking ahead, I think, we want to continue to getting that market access abroad is going to be very, very important. We want to continue to work with the U.S. government to help us through next year. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done through National Milk and U.S. DEC on opening this market access. Like to get milk into the UK, our dairy products into the UK. Like to have some reciprocity with Europe. Want to do some more work with India. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but we need to do it. So being a member of a cooperative and being part of a collection of cooperatives working together with National Milk and U.S. DEC, to me, is more important than ever.
Cricket, I've seen you nodding as you've been listening to Ken. Given what Dennis and Ken have both been saying, how does Agri-Mark fit into this context they're describing?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about this whole conversation, and I've just got this example like in my head and how I can apply it, maybe relate to this, and then maybe, you know, some things we're looking at how to maybe move that even a little further here in the future. But a few things come to mind that I think about with that. Co-op structure proves resilience in the face of crisis, right? Crisis creates opportunities for farmers, and they'll always tend to lean in to their with co-ops for challenges they face. And Agri-Mark needs to be there for its members, realizing that collaboration, consistent, unified messaging, and I just heard it again. I just think that is so powerful with congressional leadership and our trade organizations like National Milk. But as they come back and I think about the example, I think about farmers look to our cooperative Agri-Mark for value and purpose, and it needs to align with that member. They're looking for value beyond their milk checks, right? They want the co-op becomes your business partner is how I look at it. Co-ops set the tone. For this, it's Agri-Mark with foresight that the past board members have had, which your current management team has had, what your board of directors has, what and that. So the example I want to share is Cabot has been a certified B Corporation for 9 years, being the world's first dairy co-op to do so. A commitment then to environmental and social impacts for consumers, customers, employees, and farm families that own Cabot. Co-ops can share our story to the consumer as well. And I just think about all of the people and leadership that got us there then and how relevant and purposeful that is now. That is the type of foresight and strategy that I think are going to continue to make cooperatives to be the platform that allows for the alignment of people's ideas to come together, that can really surface the ideas to bring us into the future. And we will need to be driving innovation and bring products that consumers want from the farm level, the co-op level, and processing. And these COVID impacts are far from over, as you know, but I know it keeps our eyes more on the opportunities before us and really opens up the new doors that we know we need to be.
So looking ahead, Sheryl, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges, and where is the most promising potential of cooperatives moving ahead?
Yeah, let's first look at that challenge. For those of you who know Minnesota, our office is in a very rural area, and we're in the midst of harvest right now. And when I go by and see a combine and a grain cart running in sync, I really think about our cooperative. And so think of that combine as the dairy farmer owners, and that grain cart is their cooperative. If they get off sync, you're going to lose some harvest. You really have to invest in both at the same time to eventually get to where you need to be. If you've got a 16-row corn head going into a 500 bushel grain cart, it's not going to work. And again, that's a really clear analogy to our farmers and their cheese plants. But now take that to the consumer, and I really think that our time has come. We've long been wanting to capitalize. Cricket, you alluded to B Corp. We have a trademark co-op crafted phrase that we use. Suddenly that is in vogue because the consumer is wanting what we can deliver. They understand the set of values that we represent and that we walk our talk. They believe in that. The Gallup poll that finally has put farmers as the most respected just affirms that. So I would go back to your question and say, number one, farm and co-op need to be in sync in their development and investment. And then let's take advantage of what today's consumer is looking for.
So with that, that is the end of prepared questions. We're running low on time. I will get one last question from the questioners. And I want to thank our panel also for taking their time today before we turn this over to Teresa. A little bit of a plug here. On Tuesday, something significant is going on, and we really don't know what the outcomes are going to be. I do know that between 10 and 11 p.m. Eastern, Paul Bleiberg, our Senior Vice President for Government Relations, and I will be talking over whatever we know at that point, and all the YCs are invited. I know you've been notified on that. And that kind of gives us a roundup for our final question, which really is, with all of the divisiveness that we have been seeing in politics today, this person writes, it seems like things have become more divisive in my co-op too. How do you manage division within the co-op?
So I think I'll take a first crack at that. And again, a very complicated, difficult area really to shore up, I think. But it's the communications piece that I think allows the divisiveness to come into play. And I could use some examples, and I think it's important of how I think we look at how we try to get the message out. This meeting for the milk was all virtual. It's accessible to all members. I think that was fantastic. That opportunity was shared and pushed through all of the membership to try to get that message out there, make sure that they understand what our national programs are doing, in different components, even through DMI. I think that's really important that we take that effort to do that. I think as directors, we're really trying to, again, make sure we're bringing relevant information to the co-op so that there's not a lot of these ideas that are surfacing. And they surface because there's lack of communication sometime on that topic. So again, I think we're always going to have a few that might try to build that divide, but I think the strong leaders are going to prevail the right information, and they'll align with the decisions.
I'll just jump in here. We've been dealing with this issue of inclusiveness in our workforce for the past year at our regular town halls with our employees. And we haven't really done that before, but I think given what's happened, what we've seen out there, our HR and Stan have included that in our discussions with our employees, but also on our farm members. We got to, at the end of the day, work together and pull everyone together and focus on moving forward. So, Stan works hard on doing that, and we all work hard with our board on making sure that everybody comes together.
I'll offer up the foundation on which cooperatives are built, and that is one member, one vote. So whether it's 30 cows, 300 cows, 3,000 cows, they're collectively owning a company together, and there is a lot of incentive to work to that common good. Back to the beauty of the cooperative structure.
Yeah, I'll just conclude by saying it is a forefront. I think our saving strength, and that of most cooperatives, again, is the structure of having grassroots representation. We're broken into 7 regions across the U.S., and each area, each district elects a representative. It's elected to a regional council. That elects into the corporate board. That moves into the executive committee and our officers. And it gives everyone, I think, from delegates, resolutions folks up through executive board members, a voice. These are the farmer owners. I was on a panel, and the moderator, it wasn't you, Alan, it was somebody else on a different panel, but they said, DFA, you've changed, because you've gone from maybe one size to another. You're the third largest global business. And I pushed back a bit. And this goes to your question, I think, in terms of division. We haven't changed. We don't change who we are as a cooperative. Farmers don't change when they buy more ground, they milk more cows. They don't change why they do things, who they do it for, the people they love, and nor do cooperatives. We wake up, I think, every day for the same people, caring about our members, their markets, their families, their communities. That doesn't change who we are. It changes maybe some how we do some things and some what we do, but not the why. And so I think, whether it's a cooperative or whether it's the U.S. as you described now, struggling with some of the divisiveness, boy, if people just understand we've got so much more in common than we have in difference here, so many things would be resolved. I think we're focusing on these small amounts of differences, and we've got so much collectively that we share in common. So.
Well, thank you for everything that you have shared on all the panelists. Apologies to those whose questions we did not get to, but we do have a very tight schedule and our next panel is about to begin. So turning it over to you, Teresa.